outspoken brother, Honorable Akin Rotimi Jr., the honorable members, especially my brothers who are with us to support me. One has spoken, Honorable Jafaru Gamboleko, who took over from me in the House of Representatives, and Honorable AKY Makama, my neighbor in Bauchi State, a member representing Al-Kalire and Kirifi Federal Constituency of Bauchi State. He has been introduced, Honorable Albert Aturicha, who was a member of the Fifth Assembly. Let me also acknowledge the chairman, NUG Abuja, the Iron Lady. She spoke quite forcefully and poignantly. Grace Ike, Chairman, House of Representatives Press Corps, Comrade Boyega Onadran. We have also here the essay to the Executive Chairman, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mr. Olufemi. Let me bring this home. The SA Media, Mr. Turaki Hassan, who is a part, I believe, once a member of the House Press Corps, always a member of the House Press Corps. He is an alumni of this institution. The members of the House Press Corps, we thank you for the work you do for our democracy, for keeping us informed, for amplifying the voices of the representatives of the people. Although occasionally we may not recognize you as such, we may not acknowledge it, but honestly, you are doing a hell of work for the survival and sustenance of our democracy. I understand the Chief Press Secretary to the Right Honorable Speaker is with us, and the Chief Press Secretary to the Deputy Speaker. You are all acknowledged. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me say that when I got this information, I thought to myself that I was going to dedicate 2 hours for the event. Unfortunately, we started a bit late. I have some other engagements that I will run to immediately after I'm done going through the text of the lecture today. But because this is a lecture, it's not a speech, it's expected to dwell more on the subject matter. I've taken time to address some of the topical questions that could come after a lecture like this. So as soon as I'm done talking to you, I would like to hand over to our able Chairman, House Committee on Media, and perhaps the essay to the Executive Chairman, the Federal Inland Revenue, to pick over pieces of our discourse in this place. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is both a privilege and a profound responsibility to stand before you today to speak on a topic that sits at the very heart of our nation's economic destiny, navigating tax reform in Nigeria, insights on President Bola Tinubu's policies. Permit me to first of all profusely thank the organizers of this event, the House of Representatives Press Corps, for deciding that we will not be addressing some abstract subject matter, but that we talk about the lifeblood of our national aspirations, the fuel for our infrastructure, our education, our healthcare, and our security. that we should talk about the new rules of the game as it affects us as individual citizens and for every single business in the country. From the multinational giant headquartered in Lagos to the innovative startups in Aba, whether we merely survive this change or we thrive because of it is solely dependent on how we collectively navigate this new frontier. Before delving into the subject matter proper, it is important to provide some context so that we don't think the reform came out of the blues or that it was some kind of ego trip embarked upon by the government. By the time President Tinubu took office, the economic debris of this nation had become too conspicuous to be ignored. 22.7 trillion, we're all journalists here, we know this, had been printed and injected into the economy in the name of ways and means, thereby destroying the value of the naira in our pockets. Also, the dual exchange rate meant that some anointed people were making hundreds of millions of naira of forex allocations from the CBN, which is Central Bank of Nigeria, without producing any goods or offering any services whatsoever. And also tying our crude sales to foreign loans in the name of forward sales of crude was fast becoming the order of the day. Some of the foreign loans had been procured in order to help strengthen the value of the naira, a measure that could only be sustained by what experts call voodoo economics. So from day one, it was very clear that something urgent, nay, revolutionary, must be done to prevent our economy from imploding. So the president's job as an economic reformer began on day one. Now every reformer knows that progress is not promised, it is fought for. All that a reformer is actually bothered about is to do the right things, not to have everything under control. As a matter of fact, if everything seems under control, it is not only an indication that you are not going fast enough, you are most probably not a reformer. As a tested Democrat, Mr. President also knows that for our economy to be worth its name, for a democracy solely to be worth its name, it must offer more than political and individual freedoms. It must offer economic choices which will lead to economic justice, most especially for the vulnerable who are least likely to recover from economic shocks. In order to reform our obsolete tax laws, Mr. President set up the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform, chaired by a renowned Nigerian, distinguished Nigerian, Professor Taiwo Oyedele. The committee came up with revolutionary reform proposals which will ultimately lead to restructuring of our laws, norms, and institutions to create a more just and equitable society. These involve a multifaceted approach of raising awareness, building support, and overcoming resistance. Reform efforts often face significant opposition from those who benefit from the status quo, requiring strategic planning, persistent advocacy, and coalition building to overcome these obstacles. This was no exception. The opposition to the reform was fierce and furious, almost fostering negative solidarity, which could lead to a race to the bottom and collective decline where everyone is forced to endure worsening conditions because no one feels capable of improving them. While I want to avoid interrogating motives, at some point it was clear that most of those opposed to the reform desired to see the president fail than succeed. Therefore, they raised issues that, even if true, were trivial. But as it related to the core goals of the reform, the issues were both trivial and untrue. It was clear that the opposition was primarily motivated by something sinister other than a collective benefit or shared ideal. Casting the president as dictatorial rather than being decisive was the high point of the opposition meant to scupper the reforms. Thankfully, Mr. President courageously held his line and refused to budge, and that is why we are here today, thanks to his courage. For decades, our tax system had been a complex, sometimes contradictory web of ordinances and acts. It was a system where too few shouldered the burden of too many, where enforcement was inconsistent, and where informality was the norm, not the exception. The goals of these reforms are ambitious and frankly necessary. Nigeria's 2025 tax reform package is the most audacious overhaul of our fiscal framework in decades, and in response to long-standing fragmentation in the country's tax laws and administration. The stated goals are to simplify the legal framework, broaden the tax base, strengthen compliance, and align selected rules with international tax practices. The Presidential Committee, in its own words, summarized the goal of the reforms thus: they protect the poor, empower businesses, encourage investment, and ensure fairness across society. They strengthen Nigerians' competitiveness, reduce inequality, and provide the government with the resources needed to invest in infrastructure, education, health, and security. The reform forms part of a broader fiscal strategy that accompanies fuel subsidy removal and exchange rate unification introduced by the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration since 2023. I believe this is a vision we can all, in principle, support, because a stronger Nigeria benefits all of us. This paper attempts to outline the key reforms, evaluate likely impacts on taxpayers, domestic and foreign, and provide practical guidance for businesses and advisors navigating the transition. To navigate the tax reforms, we need to know the changes so that as taxpayers or tax administrators, we can optimize the benefits for ourselves and the nation at large. The reform replaced and consolidated 16 federal tax statutes into 4 principal acts, as itemized below. 1, the Nigerian Tax Act NTA 2025, which consolidated all income transaction and instrument tax provisions into 1. Nigerian Tax Administration Act NTAA 2025, which modernized tax assessment, collection, dispute resolution, and compliance rules. The third is the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Act 2025, which established a central federal revenue agency to simplify tax administration. The fourth is the